Hi there, Plant Girl here. I thought I would come out real quick and just give an update. I've had a request for an update on the cherry trees that the University of Saskatchewan grows or developed. You can find them for sale quite often at retailers now and quite readily available, I find. Not always all the varieties, but a lot of big boxes, retailers and that will often carry at least one of their varieties. They're great cherry trees for growing in cold climates. I believe they're all hardy down to zone 2, which is great for Saskatchewan, Canada, where I live. And they have slightly different fruiting times, all of them. I can't remember the exact times of the fruiting, but they're all in the spring at some point. And they are supposed to have they're not a sweet cherry like you would buy at the store cherry, but they're not a like completely sour wild cherry. So they all vary on the brick scale a little bit, but they're very similar in their sweetness. So they still have a real tartness to them, but you can eat them fresh, and they also work really well for baking. So the first one that I planted was the Romeo, and it's right now probably, I'm 5'7". I don't know how well you can see here, but it's probably around 6 to 6.5 feet tall. And I purchased this tree as a small tree in a tree can and planted it in a video. That was in 2019. So it was already about 4 or 5 feet tall probably about 4 feet tall when I purchased it, I believe. And I do have a video on that if you want to go back and look at it, and then you can see the comparison for yourself of the size. I wanted to also mention, if I can get in here, when I purchased the Romeo, when I brought it home, I don't know if it was the trip home or what happened, but the main leader broke. So this tree may never get to its full size potential, which is about 8 feet tall. It has grown another branch, and I had at one point had a stake and tried to kind of train it to go straight up, but it really wants to just do its own thing, so I've just kind of let it. So that may affect its overall height in the end, but I'm not looking for a big tall tree. I'm just looking for something that provides me with some cherries, and in fact with the greenhouse behind it, I'm okay with it being on the shorter side. It had a lot less branching on it, and has grown out a lot wider and fuller in that way. But I find it's a very sparse tree for, it has very few leaves on the interior of the limbs. But it actually fruited very well for me this year. It's fruited every year I've had it, but this year it had probably a dozen or more cherries on it, and they held and stayed, and would have been great for harvesting if I had been in town when they were ready, but the birds got to them before me, so I only had, I think, like 3. But it was really nice, and I'm excited to see what it does as the years keep going and it keeps getting larger and stronger. The next cherry I have here is Juliet, and even though I purchased Juliet as just a small little whip in a small little pot, it was purchased mail order and sent to me. So I planted this in early spring 2021. It has grown immensely, as you can see. Oftentimes you'll hear that trees do better, smaller trees do better being planted because they have less shock to their system and they'll settle in faster and grow better. And this seems to have happened with the Juliet. It's doing really well for me. It has not fruited yet. I feel like I had a few flowers on it this spring. I can't remember for sure, but if I did, I must have lost them to wind or frost. I didn't get any fruit on it, but it is really nice and full. It's a very nice specimen tree, and I'm very happy to have this in the yard, and I suspect with how well it's growing and how the size that the Romeo was when it started fruiting, that probably next year I will start to see more flowers and more fruit on it. The last cherry I want to share with you today here is Cupid, and it's kind of hard to see with the hanging basket behind it, but if I step in here, so I give you a better view of how big Cupid is. So Cupid was purchased the same time I purchased Juliet. They came in the same size container, the same size plant. Now they're in slightly different parts of my yard. So Cupid is not getting quite as much full sun. It's getting, a part sun to sun type area, but it is receiving a little bit of shade in the afternoon. And I don't know if that is why I have such a difference in growth size, or if it's just because of the variety. Eventually, all three of these trees are supposed to grow to be very similar in size, which is around 7 to 8 feet tall and 6 feet wide. They branch quite low, all of them. I've been starting to trim up the Romeo and the Juliet to have their limbs hang a little bit higher up off the ground, but I can't trim too far because they're not going to get to be a really high tree. The Cupid has split into about 3 main stems, so I won't be able to trim it up any taller at all, or the branches up any higher off the ground. But I think in this location here, that'll be just perfect. This one hasn't shown, as far as I can remember, any signs of blooms or fruiting, but again, it is getting to be about that same age, so now it's probably 3 years old, I would say, from when I got it. 2 years since I purchased it, and I'm sure it was about a 1-year-old whip when I bought it. So it should probably start to fruit in the next couple of years, just like the Juliet. Anytime from next year to, I'd say, 2 to 3 years, I'll start to see some fruit. But they're looking really nice and healthy. The Juliet and the Cupid definitely are nicer looking plants, in my opinion. The Romeo is a much looser style plant. It would be probably better kind of just tucked back, like for an orchard area or something, as instead of how I have it, which is framing my greenhouse, and it's a very open plant. And I don't know, I just think it looks a little bit gangly. They do all get a lot of cross branching in them, and I do need to come in the late winter and do some pruning so that they're not rubbing and opening up wounds for disease. So I try to keep on top of that. But otherwise, I just try to keep, the center, especially of this one that has multiple main stems, open so that it's not, the branches aren't growing into the middle and then crossing. And I just try to keep things kind of moving in an upward fashion instead of hanging down to the ground. Because that is just my preference. Otherwise, the crossing branches is, that opens up wounds, and you don't want that. So hopefully this was helpful to any of you that have been curious about these trees that the University of Saskatchewan has bred and wondering how they do in a home setting. I actually had a chance this year to go to the Arboretum at the University of Saskatchewan, and I was really hoping to see these trees in action there, but I could not find them on display anywhere. But this is what they look like in my yard. I don't give them a lot of extra love and care. The Romeo and the Juliet are both suckering. So that is something you need to be mindful of. And I'm just looking down now and thinking there might be a sucker coming off of this guy here, but I think it's actually from the chokecherry behind me. So there is some maintenance and upkeep with these trees, like there is with a lot of trees, fruit trees especially, but they have withstood some harsh winters and are scorching sun in the summer, a little bit of droughty conditions, and they're doing quite well. I did give them good water the first year, and after that they've just kind of been on their own for the most part, unless we have weeks on end of high temperatures and no water, no rain. So thanks for coming along to learn a little bit more about these Saskatchewan bred cherry trees, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.